Hello, everybody. I'm Julie Lytle, the Director of Distributed and Lifelong Learning at Bexley Seabury, and I'm helping Jan Grinnell and Connie Campbell-Pearson to facilitate tonight's conversation on the Deacons' response to the pandemic. This is part of Deacons Talking on the Road to Emmaus, which for one more month is going to be held on the third Thursday of the month. Look forward to joining us on May 21st at 7 p.m. when Deacon Kathy Shanahan and folks from Maryland are going to be talking about fostering reconciliation and faith in public policy. But that's coming. Look for the registration link. For now, we're going to be talking about the pandemic, and I'm going to turn it over to Connie to be able to facilitate our conversation. So thank you.
Welcome, everyone. We want to give everybody an opportunity. Oh, Jan, do you want to say something first?
Yes, I wanted to open with a prayer.
Oh, please do, of course.
So let us pray. Oh God, you made us in your own image and redeemed us through Jesus, your Son. Look with compassion on the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred which infect our hearts. Break down the walls that separate us. Unite us in bonds of love and work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth, that in your good time, all nations and races may serve you in harmony around your heavenly throne, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Now, Connie, and I will be typing notes.
All right, so tonight we do want to give anybody an opportunity, if there's some way that you are being affected by the pandemic that you'd like to share anything with us, that's great. But we do want to really set up the majority of our discussion tonight on what we think might be ahead for us as deacons, especially considering the great amount of people that are out of work. What is that going to mean for the ministries that we're involved in? What's it going to mean for the church? Is anyone preparing for that potential catastrophe that's down the road? And so I'll just open it up tonight, and if you have anything that you'd like to share about something that you're doing now, or what thought you might have been giving to what's coming and what that might look like for you.
Who knows?
Who knows, huh, Margaret?
Yes. I'm from Vermont. I'm Peggy, and I'm a deacon in South Burlington, Vermont. We're, of course, doing all of our services by Zoom. Our bishop has made it very clear that we're not going anywhere except to Zoom for a long time. Our state has just begun to open its doors just a little bit, so that's encouraging. The reason I joined this is because I've been having these questions in my own heart about what does this mean for my diaconal ministry, because I can't go anywhere. And so I've done a few things in our church, which makes me feel really good, but I'm feeling like my ministry is really changing, and I don't know I don't know what's ahead. So I'm here to listen, but that's kind of a little bit of where we're coming from. I don't want to be just involved with creating Zoom worship anymore. You know, we have no Sunday school anymore. We've got a circle of support group that I organize so that we're in touch with each other. Every member of our church gets called by somebody every single week. So that's how we're keeping in touch. So I feel like that certainly is diaconal ministry, but beyond that, I don't know.
I think you're speaking for a lot of us, Peggy. Thank you very much for speaking up. I see some of you nodding your heads. Is there something you'd like to share?
I was on a Zoom call today with somebody who shared an image that I find fascinating. It doesn't give answers, but it helped me to visualize what's happened. And they were talking about a book that I have not read, Canoes,
Oh,
Canoeing the Mountains.
Canoeing the mountains.
Have you all read that book? But the image of, so they use the image of Lewis and Clark leaving St. Louis in canoes to get to the ocean. And all of a sudden, as you know, the terrain of our country is not all water from St. Louis to the ocean. And they confronted the mountains with canoes, which obviously they had the wrong equipment and the wrong resources for what they needed. And the concept being that we can't live our future based on the past. And I love that image. So we as deacons, in my mind, are sitting in canoes and we don't know what's in front of us, whether it's water or mountains or desert or forest or, I mean, I just like that image.
So one of the things that we've been talking about is the fact that if it's new wine, we can't put it in the old wineskins. And that has just really been living in me for several days, the last week or so, as we've talked about that. What are the new wineskins and what does it look like? Because there's something new that's happening. And I don't want to go back to the same old that we've had in our churches, for sure. I don't know what it means for the deacon ministry, but I just know that I can't find myself all tied up like I was before with the, multiple services and all of that kind of stuff. We're reaching more people. I don't like the Zoom, but we're reaching more people. And we are doing some of our ministry, like the prison. They're allowing us to write, which we've never been able to do before. And they are setting up conference calls for us to meet with the inmates. So that's one thing. But as far as the homeless, all we did in April, we're in Montana. We just bought them all camping gear and had to turn everybody out because we couldn't make we had no place to shelter them. So, and it was snowing today. So.
Here too. Snowing in Vermont today.
Yeah.
Yep.
Somebody else? Anne, I see you're making noise with your phone.
Well, I live in New Hampshire, but I'm from the Diocese of Maine, and right now I'm unassigned. But I've been involved with the dial-a priest, the last, the meeting on the phone with folks that are dying and their families. And I've been involved with a group that's made up of New Hampshire people who are involved in worship, and the ACLU, New Futures, which is an advocacy group, and a few other groups like that. And we have a detention center a few miles away. And a lot of the immigrants were are being detained there. At one point it was 200, it's down some, but it's very crowded. And right now there hasn't been an outbreak of COVID, but we're afraid of that. So we are doing demonstrations. We have permits and stuff, and we ride around in our cars with signs, and we circle the detention center several times, and we have a rally afterwards. And so that's kind of what I've been doing.
Thank you, Anne. That's wonderful.
Okay.
Dan, what is it that you're trying to accomplish with your protest? What is it that you're asking for?
We're trying to get the governor to realize that it would be in the best interest of everyone that's detained there, both the criminals and the people that were just detained because they were undocumented immigrants, that it would be in the best interest to take the people that are not criminals out of there and put them in other places. There are other places available where they would have more room and more access to medical care and things, and that would also give the prisoners more room, and it'd be less likely for everybody to come down with COVID. So it's trying to get the governor to see what's going on.
I'm looking at Tracy Middleton's remark about do we know what kinds of actions were effective in past similar circumstances? Any book about things that helped in the 30s? And I was just thinking about all of the CCC camps and the building of bridges and dams and infrastructure. All of that took place in order to put people to work. I don't know if someone wants to say something about that, but that's where our whole Social Security system came from. I mean, that was the beginning of it. Does anybody want to make a comment about that? I'm not sure where it would work here. We've become so technological, it's like manual labor doesn't hardly fit anymore.
Well, it still does. And, you know, if there's one thing that this pandemic has shown us is that a lot of what we took for granted as the way things are just don't work. You know, and regardless of what your political leanings are, the inequalities and the injustices that are going on right now in terms of the populations that are being served by the medical community, by the government, and where people are giving or working with resources, there's tremendous opportunity, I think, for us as deacons to speak to those situations in terms of economic justice, in terms of social justice, and from a gospel perspective. And then, you know, I see Ellen Adams on this call. You know, some of the things that we've been doing here in Connecticut are working with the various congregations beyond our own congregations to help coordinate assistance to food banks and to shelters that are finding themselves in situations that are new to them because they can't social distance, or they don't have the food connections with manufacturers or distributors to get product, or the shelters don't have enough volunteers because most of the volunteers there are in what are considered vulnerable groups. And so we're trying to do our best to, you know, put our finger in the dike there. But I personally think there's a lot of opportunity for deacons in the church now and into the future, because the church itself is going to have to change. It's no longer about the big building. It's no longer strictly about, as much as I love the Eucharist, it's no longer just about going to be fed with bread and wine. It's about a lot of other things that our society hopefully will recognize that, you know what, all this rugged individualism is fine, but we need to be acting and thinking more as a community as well.
I know the last time I went into the church, I felt like it was an albatross. You know, we're doing fine without that building.
So Connie?
Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm hearing is, you know, over the last 50 years, in terms of Suzanne Watson Epting, we've been in all these different waves. And this is perhaps the pandemic wave, or whatever we want to call it, where we're going to reestablish ourselves. But I think we have been preparing for this in terms of what Jeff was saying, to piggyback onto what you're saying, Jeff, is we have been finding and discovering and teaching new deacons about the prophetic voice.
Yes.
And so when you talk about raising our voices, that's what I immediately think of, is that as prophets, the doing might be using our voice, both in the church and in the world, if we find our way to be advocates. And I think the timing, Julie, of the next Deacons Talking might help us with that. And I'm wondering out loud here, I'm thinking out loud, I'm thinking as I'm speaking, as to whether or not it's time in our deacon formation programs to be helping and preparing deacons with that prophetic voice, more focus on that. And that's just throwing out for conversation. Do others have that same kind of sense? Because to solve the economic inequalities, it's not going to be about us getting cans of soup and distributing soup as much as trying to impact changing the system.
Yeah.
We need to do the soup. We need to do the soup, but it's also going after the legislation.
Jan, I agree with you 100%. We are really good at direct service and engaging people, and that's wonderful. But we need to find ways to be more effective because it's systemic challenges that we're facing, and we have to address them systemically. And I think deacons are, because we are witnesses, because we work at the margins, we ourselves see what is happening, and that makes us more effective in doing testimonies at our legislatures or working for change that can make a real difference, both within our church and within our larger communities. So I agree 100%.
Ellen, did you want to say something?
Yes. So we can, still, as it said, use our prophetic voices, so we can still preach, and we can, the assistant priest at our church and I are going to be doing a Zoom course on white supremacy, because we both preached about that the last 2 Sundays, and our church was being involved in a pollinator pathway. We were just getting that off the ground, and so I'm going to be writing an op-ed piece for the newspaper about pollinator pathways, and we're doing the groundwork for contacting the people along the pathway that we've chosen to get them on board with us and things like that. So there are things in the community that we can do as far as organizing things. And we did organize around the food to make sure that our food went from a pantry that served people every Tuesday morning to just being an emergency shelter where they came and picked up things outside. But we are trying to make sure that there's notices on the door to tell people where they can get food all throughout the region. So we are trying to coordinate that.
Connie, can I say something here before I need to jump off for our other call?
Yes.
I just think because this is what for me is rising out of the pandemic is that everyone is affected on some level rather than it being solely a subgroup issue. And so I feel like in our community of Missoula, that it has brought more of that ecumenical and neighborhood groups together. And so to have a deacon in the midst of that more collective work, and some of it, yes, is direct service that needs to happen now because people are without. but it's also immediately connecting with the city council and the mayor and the county commissioners. And we're in the midst of election time here in early June. And so reaching out to our state wide candidates about some of the systemic issues. I think it puts us in a perfect place, if you will, because we are part of a greater collective. At least in my world, I'm part of an even bigger collective than I was before. And so that awareness is heightened, and there's more hands on deck to address both the direct needs, but also the systemic needs.
Thank you, Darcy. Go ahead, Paul.
So bouncing off what Dorsey just talked about, the last few years in my diaconal role, I've had a large focus on transformational ministry, which is different than transactional ministry. There's a little bit of a deeper relationship, looking for kind of root causes in people's lives rather than just kind of meeting their immediate need. And within the last month or two, there's been a great shift in the ministries in my county towards a transactional, because there's so much of what's called a situational poverty occurring right now. A lot of people that are in need of transformational ministry are from a history of more of a generational poverty. They were the poor family, coming from poor roots in some sense, and you now have a lot of families that are entering in a very situational poverty, just as the direct results of the pandemic. And there's efforts to prevent them from moving to a generational poverty if they don't get help now or within the next 6 months or so. And I've seen that collective effort, that ecumenical effort, jump on that awareness within that last month. And so weekly right now in Sheboygan, we have about 40 nonprofits that I don't know how communicative they would have really been a year ago. There certainly wasn't this constant communication going on week to week, but right now it's almost like this wartime effort going on where people are really willing to have a conversation and they're just willing to share as much information as possible. So no one's being left on the side of the road in some sense. And so I've been very encouraged by that effort in people sharing needs being identified, and then also sharing what resources are available. And when I think of the other clergy that are going on in my parish and somewhat in my diocese, there certainly has been this ramp up of online ministry going on. A lot of people creating offices and trying to put together services and stuff together. But I'll tell you, I feel like I'm somewhat in a fortunate position that I've been able to be somewhat active in my role compared to a traditional priest role, because they're so hooked to that Sunday service situation that they're kind of driving themselves crazy with not being able to do that. Mm-hmm. And I've had this opportunity. One of our parishioners presented an idea where we could reach out to those that are receiving stimulus payments, but necessarily weren't in a position to really need the stimulus payment. Because if you know, everyone's kind of getting them if you qualify, but you may not really need it. You might be on Social Security, you may be well employed. If you're making $150,000 a year with your spouse, you're probably doing okay, especially if you're still working, but you're still going to get the full check. So we reached out to our congregation and to others saying, if maybe you don't need it, right? Maybe you didn't get unemployed or underemployed right now. And we've seen this great response where we're pulling together money. And then as a deacon, right, as historically, you look at the early church, deacons kind of being advisors on how money gets distributed, that's been my role assigned right now at Grace Episcopal in Sheboygan, where we've created what's called a compassion fund, purely based on these stimulus payments. And we're mimicking the model that I've been seeing with these nonprofits, where they've created a rapid response effort. So you have a slew of people that are they need the money right now, right? They can't wait a week. They can't wait for the governor's offices to figure stuff out and things like that. They're on those last legs. So we've been able to kind of have a rapid response creation right now that's it's been wonderful to see so far. And it's been able to allow me to be somewhat mobile, where I was worried for a while, right? Just like everyone else is talking right now, is like, how do I still continue to be a deacon? And this is something that kind of popped up in the last 2 weeks that I'm excited about, and I'm hoping it's going to keep kind of building that way. The idea was presented from an experience from 2008 when we had a Great Recession, and there was similar need in the sense of people losing their houses and mortgage payments and things like that. So it might be an idea that in your own diocese or in your own community, reaching out to those that maybe necessarily don't need their stimulus payments and can put it to better use.
Paul, do you have, can you give us more information on how did you reach out to these people? Was it an email? Was it a letter? Was it in sermons? How did you connect with people?
It was all of the above. I preached Monday, Thursday, and spoke about it then, and then wrote in our newsletter monthly, and then we've written an email now. And we've also, what we've done is we've attached it to our stewardship campaign. So we're trying to be a little bit more proactive with saying thank you throughout the year and increasing communication to make it really more of an annual campaign. And so part of that communication recently has been touching on this idea that, not only thank you for continuing your payments for our annual budget, but then your opportunity to further the efforts.
Thank you. I know a couple of churches in Bozeman have done exactly the same thing with if they put an object in front of their congregation of something that they could achieve, they've done that, and they've had people give their stimulus checks to a fund that's been going to helping the homeless so far. So that's what we've done. Thank you, Paul. Ellen, did I see your hand up earlier? Okay. Nadine's got both her hands up, but I don't think she wants to talk. One of the other parts about the seventh wave has been the idea of integration with the bishop, more integration. And that's something that I see coming, is that as the deacons are working more in the justice ministry, we have an opportunity to be more with our bishops and be more diocesan instead of, around the whole diocese rather than just in our local parishes. And that's been something that we've been encouraging in Montana, is our deacons considering more diocesan roles in the area of justice mostly. Other thoughts?
Does anyone,
Go ahead, Marcia. You're muted, Marcia.
Sorry, thank you. Connie, could you speak a little bit more about your thoughts about how that integration would work with deacons working closer on the diocesan level versus, are you saying like it versus assignment to certain congregations or deaneries or?
Well, we've been thinking about regional deacons. What does that look like?
Okay.
And we're not exactly sure yet, but we have lots of priests that are in charge of clusters. So they have 2, 3, even 4 churches that they manage. And so a deacon being, when the bishop visits any of the, like when the bishop comes anywhere within a 100-mile radius of my parish, for example, I would travel with the bishop to whatever parish they were going to. Now, mind you, in Montana, we do not have parishes every 25 miles. So, I mean, we're pretty doggone big and we don't have very many parishes at all, but we're thinking how deacons could be used more in, especially in parishes that don't have a deacon at all. Can we visit on a once every 2 months, be there to assist the priest? And it's more of a liturgical role. We want them to see, though, more of not just a liturgical role. I mean, there's a place for that, but we want to be able to talk about the diaconate when we go to those places, to talk to them about stepping up beyond just doing charity work to doing justice work. Because if the whole congregation understands what it is to give in charity, you know, you need about 10% of those people to make a difference, to really understand what justice work is. And you can have a successful justice ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody won't be involved in the justice bandwagon. They're too frightened of it. But you don't need that many to do good work.
I'm wondering if Johanna could speak to the work in New Hampshire with the Poor People's Campaign on June 20th, what that's about.
Oh, am I muted? Let me see.
Oh, you're fine, Joanna.
Oh, you can hear me.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Originally it was going to be a march, and so the deacons were going to organize getting transportation to the actual march, but now it's not a march. So we haven't really organized yet, but we want to participate in some way to get others to get involved. They have a kit that's out of different ways that you can get involved in that day that's virtual. One idea is making banners and putting them on your cars. Another one is singing protest songs and videotaping yourself, and those would go up online. There's also a movie that's coming out, and they have a couple of showings, so encouraging people to watch the movie so they can learn more about what the Poor People's Campaign is all about. So what we are planning to do probably next is just gather as deacons to see how we can promote the Poor People's Campaign and the events going on June 20th. So that's as far as we've gotten right now.
Thank you.
But our local New Hampshire Council of Churches, we have an Episcopal priest who's the executive director, and he's very involved in it. So I think between all of us, we should be spreading the word about it and trying to get some more participation within the diocese.
Is anybody involved with training deacons that you could talk about specific work you're doing with prophetic voice? Does anybody have that experience on the call? Okay.
Well, I will tell you this. We took our deacons through the community organizing class at Bexley Seabury 2 years ago, and we're going to do it again. It's an amazing class that totally transformed our ideas of the difference between charity and justice for our deacons. And it's a 40-hour class, and it really meets the criteria and all of the objectives of human understanding and community organizing. And so it's really become a very valuable class that we have all of our deacon students take. And it can be done online. which is wonderful. You do not have to go to Bexley Seabury. You can do it from the comfort of your home. If sitting in front of your computer for 8 hours a day for 5 days is comfortable, not.
So
Yes,
Julie, can you send us that information?
Unfortunately, the course is already filled for this summer, but it is a course we offer every summer. And because of the pandemic, Bexley Seabury shifted all of our 1 week physically gathered classes to being a variety of different things. The community organizing course is happening within 1 week, but most of it's 2 hour-and-a-half blocks, one in the morning and one later in the afternoon. So you don't have to sit in front of the computer the whole day. And it is an excellent class. I'd encourage folks to look at it. And if any of you end up being in a situation where you have a large enough group, 8 or 10 folks that would want to do it within a region, we might be able to work something out to offer it as a lifelong learning course if you don't need the full graduate credit, which we could also think about doing with you. So feel free to be in touch with me offline if that's of interest.
There's an enormous amount of reading to do before you take the class, and you would not want to go into the class without having read it, because it zooms right past you if you don't. But I highly recommend it for training your deacons. Margaret, did you have something you wanted to say?
I do, only I'm not a deacon. I'm an aspirant, and
whoa!
I feel a little bit. I need to let you know that I'm so eager to be accepted as a postulant and go forward in this, and I'm functioning in many ways exactly as you all are. But I just felt I should let you know. Should I take myself off of this?
No, absolutely not.
No.
Not.
No.
Okay. All right.
Do you want to move to Rhode Island?
Do I want to move to Rhode Island?
How about Vermont? We're living here.
Vermont is very appealing.
Yeah, come ahead. We have a new bishop and everything.
We have the ocean. We have the ocean.
Okay, Lori's gonna speak.
I just wanted to say, I felt like I talked over Julie, but Julie, does it have to be, you said a group of people from a region, does it have to be a region?
Well, I guess it doesn't.
Like if AED said we wanted to do it as a continuing ed for deacons, we could?
I'd be happy to work with you to create something that we could make available.
And what's the minimum number?
Well, this is where we would need to have a longer conversation, but depending on whether you want it for graduate credit or you want it for something that gives you the skills without necessarily having the credentials toward a degree, we could work something out that would be much more cost effective and would cover the same material, but wouldn't necessarily have the testing and the other requirements that an academic course offers. And usually we need to have at least 10 people to make that a viable course.
Okay.
So
I'll talk to you later.
I'd work with you on that.
Yeah, I'll talk to you later too, because I have 6 students that have to take it next summer. So please don't tell me the class is full already.
You can probably get 10 people right on this call.
Yeah.
I have 15 in my class, and we're doing it in September.
We'll talk.
Yes, Paul. Go ahead, Paul.
Another resource for the learnings of the prophetic voice, I'll offer the Mentoring the Diaconate, which I took with Call in the fall with Geraldine Swenson that taught it. There's a specific focus on that element as a mentor to a new deacon. So if there's not a lot of exposure for the prophetic voice and how it integrates into your ministry while you're in formation, hopefully that deacon is being matched with a mentor that perhaps maybe went through that course or has that focus on the competencies that AED has created, where you still continue to think about it after you've gotten your schoolwork done. Now you're deployed and you can have that on your mind and start to create that relationship with your local parish.
I took the call, the prophetic voice of the deacon from Suzanne Watson-Epting a few years ago at Call, but I don't know if they still offer that class.
No, they don't.
Okay, it was very good.
Yep, I took it also. I took it from the one in California, Church of the Pacific or whatever it was. Yeah,
CDSP.
Yes, it was excellent, excellent.
So there's a big note about a film that Johanna's just put on the chat. We Cried Power for the Poor People's Campaign. Thank you. And she's got a lot of information there.
I'm putting that in the notes right now.
Thank you. And I saw right above that that Tracy had put a couple of books she found about the prophetic voice, Crucial Conversations and Crucial Accountability.
So they're not primarily framed from the point of view of a, church context, but the idea is like how to have a conversation with someone where there is emotion, difference of opinion, and high stakes. And then the sort of companion book to that is talking about accountability. And one of the things that that book starts out with is kind of like some studies that people did about how reluctant people are to speak up when they notice something unjust, or and like the example that they chose was really simple, like somebody cutting in line. And so what they would do to test this is like, cut in line in front of people and see if people would say anything to them, and like nobody said anything. So then they tried like experimenting with like planting somebody who would say something, and then having another person come and cut and see if like copying an example would happen. So I mean, this is really fascinating. They're talking about like, basically how do you build your capacity to be able to hold people accountable to things, and how do you have an accountability discussion? How do you set it up? So, and I think sometimes like, especially with, folks who are in a discernment process, they get really kind of on fire about the prophetic voice thing, and then they get smashed into ground into the dirt because it's like they don't also have skills for how to do that. I don't know, like carefully, or without just going like, and I like some of the, I don't know, social justice warrior kind of thing is like we want to afterwards have said things that will make it clear we were on the right side of history, and I'm like, but I don't know, is that also going to be the thing that is like effective in like shifting people who aren't in that camp already? And if you want to try to dialogue with somebody that disagrees with you, where they have emotion, difference of opinion, and the stakes are high, like how do you have like that in a kind of like a negotiation, or like a conversation that might actually yield a change, rather than just like, I'm gonna stake out my righteousness camp and, let you all know that you're awful.
If anybody has read Parker Palmer's book, Healing the Heart of Democracy, that really is a great book on helping us to see how, if we can find the middle ground, there's really only about 15 to 20% of our population are on either end of the real radical left or right. And that still leaves 70% of us to be a majority and make a democracy work if we're willing to do it. And it's an excellent book on how to find the middle ground for all of us, which I think is going to be part of that prophetic voice, is helping people find the middle ground so that we know how to come together as a nation or a congregation. I mean, ours is a purple congregation, but for the most part, the deacon can navigate that if if you know what your goal is, and that is to bring everybody into the same playing field. Lori, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's why I think my community organizing was so valuable, because the two things that I live my life out of from community organizing is assume best intentions. Don't walk into the room and assume that you understand exactly why everybody is doing what they're doing. And I have had a lot of good luck helping people who were I work with immigrants, almost all of whom are undocumented. And I've had so much luck helping people if I just got off my high horse. And I know that they're, anti-immigrant, but at the same time, they're anti-immigrant for reasons. And those reasons can be understood. It's not all racism. Some of it is indeed, absolutely no doubt at all. But a lot of it is fear and jealousy and just all kinds of strange things that I never thought were part of the story at all. And to have that ability to walk in without, I think a lot of, I'm in Massachusetts, where there's a liberal stance to the Episcopal Church here that basically walks into every room and silences everybody else, including most of the undocumented people who we are trying to work with, because they're all evangelical Christians. So, how do you make a bridge when you walk into the room and decide the moral value of everybody before you ever entered the room? So I think community organizing is such a useful skill, because it basically teaches you to withhold judgment until you know people.
It's basically become our capstone course for all of our deacons is the community organizing, and it's totally worth it, Julie. Yeah. I can't say enough about it. You guys really scored on that one, and Barbara Wilson is amazing.
You gave her $100 to say all that, Julie, didn't you?
Yeah.
I will be happy to pass that on to her.
Somebody else. Elizabeth. Go ahead, Ann. I was going to call on Elizabeth, and she didn't have her hand up.
Oh, okay. It's I have some information on a course it's an online course, and it's only a few hours long. It's called Resilience for Activists, Taste and See. And I was thinking that for those of us that are already involved in this, you can get pretty burned out. So it sounds like it would be very helpful. It's run by the Maine School of Ministry. It's a UCC class, and it's the whopping fee of $10.
Resilience for Activists by the UCC.
Yeah, it's Maine School of Ministry, and the person presenting it is Margaret Benefiel, PhD, Executive Director of the Shalom Institute for Spiritual Formation in Washington, D.C. And it is on June 13th from 8:30 to 12:30 p.m.
There is another resilience. It's put out by a resilience group. It's put out by the Good Network. I'll find the link while somebody else is talking and put it up for you.
Okay, thanks.
While Connie is doing that, we have about 10 minutes left before we end this call, which I'm finding fascinating. One of the things we do have to talk about, and maybe it's time to do that. Does anybody have something pressing to say right now? Because I was going to go into the what's next. Elizabeth.
So I would just say, having being over 60 and having a newly diagnosis of immune deficiency and still being a postulant for the diaconate, this COVID business has really kind of shaken me up. But I, through discernment, realized, oh my gosh, I have a food handler's license. I could offer to make sandwiches in my kitchen for Operation Night Watch, which is a group that helps with the homeless here in Portland. And making these sandwiches, man, they are the most blessed, prayed over sandwiches. And I take them and I can safely deliver them to the person there at the office. But on Friday, it was a beautiful spring day. And so there were all these homeless people sleeping, laying on the sidewalk or side of the road, really, because there wasn't a sidewalk, waiting. And it hurts so much that, I can't have a conversation with them. I think we have to be honest about and grieve the part that we are losing. You guys are all being very optimistic, and I appreciate that.
No.
But it's also a part of this that we're losing, or some of us are not going to be able to do in the same way.
Oh my God. I want to respond to that. I really do. And my heart goes out to you. The first one of these phone calls that we had, I was so enraged. I cried for 2 hours after this phone call because of the fact that I'm presiding over the demolition of a ministry that is never going to be able to survive this. And I know it in my gut. I have to make money to survive it, to help it survive. And I feel like my dream is being killed by COVID. So just because I have a smile on my face, I want to assure you, I am grieving to the core of my being. And I'm so glad you brought it up, because I felt like such a fool when I was kind of upset on the first one of these calls. But there's tremendous loss here, tremendous loss. The loss of the Eucharist, there's going to be a loss of a lot of parishes. I don't think we're going to be able to keep, I mean, my diocese has, it's not like Montana, Connie. We've got an Episcopal church on every corner and a Lutheran and a Methodist as well, because they all had to have, every New England village has its own Episcopal church. And half of them are half-time or less. And there's no way in heck these churches are going to survive. There's no way. And there's going to be tremendous change. And I think that although the diaconate is going to have a great role in prophecy, I think the biggest threat to us is that they're going to really push on the no-cost curate, role for us. I think that will be a place where that will be a great deal of pressure on folks. And I'm not saying that where that's needed, that's fine, but I'm really worried about, I don't want to run a church and I don't want to provide communion to the last 12 gray heads in the pews. I'm sorry, I have other things to do. And, I think they should get communion, but even these days, I'm not sure that I think they need communion every week. I think people need food more, and I'm working with a bunch of undocumented people, 80% of whom have lost their work. So, they've lost their work and they're all in the food business. So the food, the laundry, or the cleaning, or the baby business. So it's, I could go on forever, but thank you for saying that, because there's a raging set of tears behind this smiling face.
Well, I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, and I'm the world's optimist if you talk to anyone who knows me, but I'm like kind of reckoning with these feelings that I have of sadness and frustration and and also discernment. Like, okay, so that door closes, what door is opening?
So I just will say I found the link. It's called thegoodgriefnetwork.org. And it's based on the AA 10 Steps to Personal Resilience Empowerment. Anyway, there's a link there for you.
Thank you.
It's not Christian based, but it's good, solid principles. And just like AA, it is a higher power. Yes, Marcia.
I'm wondering if, as we move forward with all of this and taking into consideration what is being said, and there is the fear about the different congregations within our Episcopal church. But I'm wondering if we won't be able to find a better way to have collaboration in an interfaith way. So for a lot of the sufferings that we're going to see a whole lot more, it hasn't even really begun yet. I fear what we're going to be seeing, that we bring more work together in a collaborative work, definitely with the other churches. And we all don't have to be doing the same, making that same wheel. So my mind is thinking that there are more and newer opportunities for us to go forward in order to do Christ's work.
Jan, you're on. You got 2 minutes.
Okay, so we have to close with, we end each of these calls with, do we want to meet again? Has this been a helpful time to gather, and would you like us to facilitate this again? I see hands up if it's a yes, please.
Yes.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
so we will,
Yes.
and 2 weeks, good timing, or 3?
Is there a way we can frame some of what we're going to talk about? We've been moving from initially being a conversation about what are we doing and making masks and finding ways to respond at that point in time was different than what I'm hearing some of the conversations being tonight. It seems like we're getting more into some real strategic planning and possibly ways of trying to support each other. I don't want to impose a topic, but I'm wondering if there's something that you're looking for that we need to think a little bit more deeply about to be able to answer some of the questions you're raising tonight. What would be useful? What would be helpful?
Tracy.
I know anytime I try to take a class, I'm wanting to know about how to be an advocate, whether it's a legislative advocate or, how to write the op-eds in a way that attracts people and not daggers, whatever. But to be more active like that, to influence the community, especially the people that are the haves, how to move them more towards the have-nots.
Tracy, you had your hand up?
Oh, yeah, one of the questions that I had put in earlier, which I didn't know if anybody had an answer to, was like, is there somebody that any of y'all know who is a historian who would have a perspective on like what kinds of things people did in the Depression, that were effective, just as like, so not that we necessarily go and repeat those exact same things, but like remix them, potentially, or use them as like ways of getting some ideas of, because I wasn't around in the 30s. Like, I don't know what that might have looked like. And so I'm wondering if we know anybody that has that kind of an expertise.
I can ask.
Okay.
Dottie?
Yes, I just wanted to remind you that in our last meeting, we had talked, somebody had questioned about how we could help the Navajo and Hopi reservations. And I did send you, I think you got it, hello?
Can you share your screen?
You just shared.
Yeah, I sent you a
It's on the screen for everyone to see.
Oh, now I see it. Okay. All right. So everybody will have the information. And as I get more, I will send it also.
Great.
I'll pass this on to my bishop, Dottie. Thank you.
Sure.
And I will include it in the notes, Dottie.
Okay, thank you.
So everybody has what you put out. So Connie, do you want to bring us to a close with a prayer?
Yes. The Lord be with you.
With you.
Lord, as we come to this time of closing, I thank you, Father, that you do give us tears, that you give us the point of anger that just stirs within us. Let that fire burn brightly within us to make the change that needs to be made. And Father, whatever we do, please don't let us put the new wine in the old wineskins, but help us to figure out how to get our canoes over the mountains. Lewis and Clark did it, Lord, and you just portaged them. I just want to see how we do that as a church and as deacons. And we thank you, Father, that there are plenty of people who want to walk alongside of us. Help us to recognize those new helpers now, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Amen.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Connie,
Thank you.
Connie, can you hang on for a minute? This is Lori.
Yes.
Just 1 second.
I'm going to encourage y'all to watch for the May 22nd program sponsored jointly by AED, Bexley Seabury, and Province One. And we'll get announcements out about the next chorus conversation within the next couple of days. So glad to have you with us. Blessings to you.
Nice turnout.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Connie, just wanted to say that I got my daughter, one of my daughter's good friends is now out at Whitefish.
Oh.
Traveling Youth. So